Level 1. The civilian, ordinary German. You live in Munich, 1933, the year the world changed. Or the year the change that had been building for 15 years finally became official, depending on how you look at it. The Weimar Republic is over. The National Socialist German Workers' Party has been in power for 8 months. Adolf Hitler is Chancellor. Your life before this was defined by the things that define most German lives in the years after the Great War. Inflation so severe that your father once described taking a wheelbarrow of cash to buy a loaf of bread. Unemployment that at its peak touched 30%. A national humiliation so total and so deliberately maintained by the victors of the war that it had become the background radiation of every conversation, every political movement, every dinner table argument for 15 years. Then things changed. The economy is improving, visibly, undeniably improving. The unemployment numbers are falling. The streets feel different, more orderly, more purposeful, the specific energy of a country that has decided it knows where it's going after years of not knowing. You don't think too hard about how some of the improvements were achieved. The books that were burned in May, you didn't read those books. The businesses that changed hands, they weren't your businesses. The neighbors who disappeared, the Jewish family 2 streets over, the communist organizer from your building. You tell yourself these things are complicated, that there are reasons, that the country needed to make difficult decisions. You tell yourself many things. You're good at telling yourself things. The radio plays music in the evening. Your children are healthy. Your husband has work again for the first time in 4 years. The flag hangs from the window because everyone on the street has hung one, and not hanging one would mean something you don't want it to mean. You hang the flag. You don't think about what you're not thinking about. That is, in 1933, entirely normal. Level 2. The Hitler Youth. Indoctrinated. You are 14 years old and you belong to something. That's the feeling that matters most at 14. Belonging. The Hitler Youth gave you that before it gave you anything else. The uniform, the group, the specific pride of marching in formation with boys your age, of being seen as part of something larger than yourself, of having adults look at you with a particular respect that you didn't have before you put on the brown shirt. Your father was skeptical at first, your mother less so. By the time you joined in 1936, it was less a choice than an inevitability. Membership was effectively mandatory, the social pressure complete, the alternative a conspicuous absence that would have marked your family in ways nobody wanted to be marked. But you would have joined anyway. The training is physical and ideological simultaneously. You run, march, camp, compete. You learn to shoot. You learn to navigate. You learn to endure discomfort without complaint. The specific hardness that the movement prizes, the suppression of softness that is framed as weakness, and weakness as a kind of betrayal. You also learn to think in a specific way. Not to think exactly, to receive. The ideology arrives through repetition, in meetings, in songs, in the speeches of leaders at every level of the hierarchy. The Jews, the communists, the November criminals who stabbed Germany in the back, the Versailles diktat, the blood and soil of the German nation, the destiny that was stolen and will be reclaimed. You hear these things so many times that they stop being arguments and become atmosphere. You don't believe them the way you believe a mathematical proof. You believe them the way you believe the air. They're simply present, simply there, the medium through which everything else is understood. At night in your bunk at summer camp, you feel for the first time in your life completely certain about what you are and where you belong and what the world means. That certainty is the most dangerous thing you've ever been given. You don't know that yet. Level 3. The party member, NSDAP. You joined the party at 21. The NSDAP has 8 million members by 1937. Joining is not an act of radicalism at this point, it's an act of professional positioning, social alignment, the acknowledgement that the party is the structure through which German life now flows, and that existing outside it means existing at the margins of everything that matters. You work at the municipal office in Leipzig. Party membership accelerates your career in ways that are never made explicit, but are completely understood. The promotions, the access, the specific warmth in rooms that were slightly cooler before you had the card in your wallet. You attend the meetings. You make the correct statements. You perform the ideology that the ideology requires. Not because you believe every word with the fervor of a true believer, but because the performance has become indistinguishable from belief, and you stopped examining the distinctions somewhere around year 2. There are things you know and don't discuss. The camps, the first ones, the early ones, the ones for political prisoners and criminals, and the people the regime has decided are enemies. You know they exist. Everyone knows they exist. The knowledge sits in the middle of conversations and is talked around rather than through, acknowledged in the specific way that things are acknowledged when acknowledgement itself is dangerous. You tell yourself they're for enemies of the state. You tell yourself Germany needed this. You tell yourself the alternative was communism, was chaos, was the continued humiliation of a great people. You're very good at telling yourself things now. You've been practicing for years. Level 4. The SA Stormtrooper, brown shirt. The street belongs to you. That's what the SA gives you that the party card doesn't. Physical dominance of public space. The Sturmabteilung were the movement's muscle before it had power and remained its visible force afterward. Brown shirts, jackboots, the specific permission that a uniform and a group provides to do things that individuals cannot do alone. You joined in 1934, after the Night of the Long Knives, after Rome and the old SA leadership were purged by the SS on Hitler's orders. The SA that you joined is diminished, disciplined, subordinate, but it still exists. It still has its function. Your function is presence. You stand outside Jewish businesses, not always doing anything and sometimes just standing, being visible, making the calculation obvious for anyone who might not have made it yet. The businesses lose customers. The customers don't need to be threatened. They just need to see you standing there. Kristallnacht, November 1938. You were there. You don't think about November 1938 directly. You think around it the way you think around all the things that have accumulated in the locked part of your mind. You were following orders. Everyone was following orders. The Jews had brought it on themselves. That's what you were told, what everyone was told, what the official version said and continues to say. You've told yourself this enough times that you no longer feel the gap between the telling and the believing. That gap closed a long time ago. You're not sure exactly when. Level 5. The SS officer. Black Order. The SS is a different world from the SA. Heinrich Himmler built it that way deliberately. An elite within the elite, selected on racial and ideological criteria, so specific that membership carries a weight that ordinary party membership doesn't. The black uniform, the death's head insignia, the sense of belonging to something that considers itself the apex of the new German order. You were recruited in 1938. The selection process was exhaustive. Physical examination, racial documentation going back 3 generations, psychological assessment, ideological evaluation. You passed everything. You were proud of passing everything. The training strips away the individual and replaces it with the organization. Not through cruelty exactly, through the systematic subordination of personal judgment to institutional authority. You learn that the SS officer doesn't decide what is right. The SS decides what is right, and the officer executes. This distinction between personal moral judgment and institutional mandate is the most important thing the SS teaches. More important than weapons training, more important than tactics, more important than any specific skill. The dissolution of personal accountability into collective action. You are assigned to an Einsatzgruppe in 1941. The war in the East has begun. What happens in the East, what you participate in, what you witness, what you do and watch others do and report in the precise bureaucratic language that the SS uses to describe things that have no precedent in human history. You file in the locked part of your mind with everything else. The locked part is very full now. You don't examine what's in it. Examining it would make it impossible to continue. Continuing is the only option you've allowed yourself. Level 6. The Gestapo agent, secret police. You transfer to the Gestapo in 1942. The Geheime Staatspolizei, the secret state police, operates differently from the SS. Less uniform, less visible, more surgical. Your job is information. Who is saying what to whom? Where resistance is forming before it becomes visible. The infrastructure of dissent before it becomes action. You have a desk, files, a telephone, the apparatus of an ordinary bureaucracy applied to the surveillance of an entire population. The Gestapo is smaller than most people imagine. Approximately 32,000 officers to surveil 80 million Germans. The ratio only works because the population surveils itself. The network of informants, ordinary citizens who report neighbours, colleagues, family members, is the actual mechanism. You process their reports, you follow up. You make decisions about what requires action and what can be filed. The decisions have consequences that are no longer abstract to you. You've seen where the people in your files go. You've written the reports that sent them there. The bureaucratic language helps. Taken into protective custody, transferred for processing, referred to the relevant authority, language that describes what happens without describing what happens, a vocabulary specifically engineered to maintain the distance between the person writing the report and the reality the report produces. You've become fluent in this language. You dream in it sometimes. Level 7. The General, Wehrmacht High Command. You command an army group on the Eastern Front, 400,000 men, a front that stretches further than the distance from Berlin to Paris. Logistics so complex that their failure, and they are failing, have been failing since Stalingrad, requires daily management of a kind that consumes every waking hour. The war is lost. You know this. Most of the men in your position know this. The question is no longer whether Germany will be defeated, but how long the defeat takes, and what Europe looks like when it's over. You don't say this out loud. Saying it out loud is treason. Several of your colleagues have been executed for saying versions of it out loud. The regime has become, in its final years, as dangerous to its own servants as to its enemies. The paranoia of a leadership that knows the end is coming and has decided that the mechanism of its own destruction will be disloyalty rather than military failure. You've navigated this paranoia for 3 years through a combination of professional excellence and the specific performance of loyalty that the situation demands. You believe in Germany. You believe in the army. You stopped believing in the leadership sometime around 1943 and have been managing the gap between that private conclusion and your public position ever since. The July 20th plot, the assassination attempt on Hitler in 1944. You knew men who were involved. You didn't report what you knew. That's the closest you've come to resistance. It doesn't feel like enough. It never feels like enough. The front moves westward every week now. You move pieces on maps that correspond to men dying in numbers that have become, through sheer repetition, impossible to fully feel. You feel them anyway. At 3 a.m., in the particular silence of a command post when the radio traffic has slowed and there's nothing between you and the full weight of everything you've done and watched and permitted and commanded. You feel them at 3 a.m., Level 8. The Inner Circle. Hitler's Table. You are in the bunker. Berlin, April 1945. The Red Army is 8 blocks away. The city above you is rubble and fire and the specific end-of-world sound of artillery that never stops. You have been in this bunker for 6 weeks, and the world has contracted to these rooms. The maps, the briefings, the meals, the presence of the man at the center of everything who has become, in these final weeks, something that is difficult to describe. He is still giving orders. The orders have become detached from reality in the specific way that power detaches from reality, when the feedback mechanisms have been corrupted for long enough. The armies he moves on maps no longer exist at full strength. The counter-offensives he orders are launched by units that have a fraction of the men and equipment the maps suggest. The victory he still describes is a thing that exists only in the room where he describes it. Everyone in the room knows this. Nobody says it. You have been at this table for 3 years. You came here through loyalty and competence and the specific willingness to say the things he wanted to hear in the moments when he needed to hear them. You are good at this. You have always been good at reading what a room requires and providing it. What the bunker requires now is a specific performance of certainty in the face of total collapse. You provide it. You have been providing it for 6 weeks, and the performance has cost you something you don't have a name for. You think about the rally in Nuremberg, 1937, the torches, the 500,000 people. The feeling in your chest that you didn't have a name for then either. That feeling and this moment are connected by a line that runs through everything you've done and seen and been. In the years between them, the line is perfectly straight. One thing led to another, led to another, led to this bunker, this table, this man giving orders to armies that don't exist. You knew at some level, at every level. You chose at every level to continue. That is the thing you will carry out of this bunker if you carry anything at all. The artillery gets closer. The man at the head of the table is still talking. You listen. You have always listened. Somewhere in Germany tonight, a child is asleep. She is 7 years old. She has never known a Germany that wasn't this Germany. The flag, the salute, the songs, the certainty. These are not ideology to her. They are the weather, the air, the simple, unremarkable background of a world that has always been exactly this way. She doesn't know about the locked rooms. She doesn't know about the files. She doesn't know about the things that are happening in places whose names she has never heard. She is 7 years old and she is asleep. And the world she will wake up into tomorrow is already ending. She will spend the rest of her life trying to understand how it happened. How ordinary people in ordinary kitchens hanging ordinary flags from ordinary windows became the architecture of something that has no ordinary word. She will never fully understand it. Nobody fully understands it. That is the most dangerous thing about it. It was ordinary people all the way down. It always is.